The last thing Elysia ever heard was the sound of her husband's voice, trembling with guilt, before the deafening crack of the gunshot echoed through the walls. The words he spoke were the final blow. "I didn't want this. I was scared." In the instant that followed, the world stood still. His body slumped, lifeless, his blood pooling onto the cold floor of their living room. The silence that descended after the shot was broken only by her shallow, rapid breaths. Her hand trembled as it lowered the gun, still smoking from the heated shot, her heart pounding as though it were trying to escape her chest. Elysia had never imagined this would be the end. But in that moment, as she looked at her husband lying in front of her, all the years of lies, deception, and betrayal came crashing down on her. Alex, the man she had loved for over a decade, had hidden so much from her, more than she ever thought possible. The secrets, his HIV, the herpes, and the lovers, had festered for years, eating away at the foundation of their marriage. And she had never known. It wasn't just the diseases that had poisoned their life together. It was the men, his secret lovers, the people she had never imagined could be part of their world. The man she had loved had been someone else entirely, and she had spent 10 years deceived, manipulated, and abandoned. As the room filled with the stench of gunpowder, a new feeling took over her. It wasn't relief. It wasn't regret. It was a profound sense of betrayal, so deep it threatened to consume her. "I didn't want this," she whispered, the words falling from her lips like ash. Elysia had always believed in the simplicity of their love. When she met Alex, she was young, full of hope, and convinced that she had found her soulmate. Their story had started like any other: awkward first dates, shared dreams of a future, and the slow, comforting rhythm of falling in love. To the outside world, they were the perfect couple. Two people who had managed to make it through the early years of marriage with laughter, understanding, and trust. But beneath the surface, things had always been different for Alex. He was a man of mystery, a quiet man who would often retreat into his own world. Elysia had noticed it early on: the subtle way he'd avoid certain conversations, the late nights at the office that never quite added up, the brief moments of guilt that flickered in his eyes when she asked about his past. But Elysia, in the innocence of her love, had dismissed those signs. She believed in him, in their marriage, and thought that the secrets he kept were simply remnants of a past life that he had moved on from. As the years passed, their life together seemed perfect. They had a beautiful home, 2 children, and the kind of bond that Elysia thought was unbreakable. Alex had never given her a reason to doubt him. He was affectionate, present, and always there for their family. The perfect husband and father. But there were cracks, small at first, barely noticeable. Elysia started feeling a distance between them, like an invisible wall that seemed to grow taller with each passing year. She would ask questions casually about his past relationships or his friends, but Alex would deflect, laughing it off, saying it was all ancient history. Whenever she pressed, he would tell her to trust him, that nothing was wrong. And so she did. She trusted him completely. But trust, Elysia would later realize, had been her greatest mistake. The first inkling of something being off came when Alex became distant, cold, even when they were together. The late-night meetings became more frequent, and his phone, once left lying around casually, was now constantly by his side, always on silent. She tried to ignore it, to tell herself that everything was fine, that her suspicions were unfounded. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It wasn't until that fateful evening, when she accidentally stumbled upon a hidden drawer in their study, that everything came crashing down. Inside, she found the first clue: the medical documents detailing his HIV diagnosis, his herpes, and a string of medical visits that she had never known about. And then there were the pictures. Pictures of Alex, smiling in the arms of other men, his expression one of contentment, of love. Her world shattered. Elysia stood frozen in the study, staring at the documents scattered before her. The words on the page blurred as her hands shook, but she couldn't look away. She'd never felt more betrayed in her life. Alex, her husband, the man she had trusted with every part of her heart, had kept this from her for years. The shock was like a physical blow, each word she read pounding into her chest, suffocating her. Alex had always been a man of few words, and Elysia had always thought that was part of his charm. He was reserved, private, a man who carried his emotions inside, never wanting to burden others with his struggles. She admired that strength in him, that sense of quiet stoicism. She had believed that it was a mark of his love for her, that he protected her from the complexities of his past, from the dark parts of himself that he thought she didn't need to know. But now, as she pieced together the fragments of his life that he had hidden, she realized just how wrong she had been. He wasn't protecting her. He was hiding from her. He had kept his secrets locked away, convinced that she would never be able to handle the truth. And for so long she had believed in him, believed that his silence was a sign of loyalty, of a man who was quietly devoted to her. But now it all felt like a cruel joke. Alex's fear of her finding out, his constant need to cover up his tracks, painted him not as a man of strength, but as a man of weakness. He had kept her in the dark, unwilling to face the consequences of his actions. And it was that fear that had ultimately led them to this breaking point. Elysia had always thought she knew her husband, his mannerisms, his quirks, his touch. She knew how he liked his coffee, how he never put his clothes away, and how he would always tell her, "It's fine, we'll figure it out." He had always been the steady hand, the one who calmed her fears and assured her that everything would be okay. But now she was left wondering, who was he really? The man she had shared her life with, or a stranger who had been wearing a mask all along? In the beginning their love had been simple and easy. They were two people who had found each other and decided to build a life together. The first few years of their marriage had been filled with laughter, late-night talks, and the hope that this love would last forever. They had dreams, big ones, of traveling the world, of growing old together. Alex had promised her the stars. He had promised her a life without secrets. But somewhere along the way something had changed. The man she thought she knew had slowly morphed into someone else, someone she could no longer recognize. And in that moment, as the gun lay heavy in her hand, Elysia understood the tragic truth. It wasn't just the secrets that had torn them apart. It was the lie of a love that had never been as pure as she had imagined. The days that followed were a blur for Elysia. Each moment felt like an eternity, her mind racing through a labyrinth of questions and doubts. She could barely look at Alex without the memory of the documents, the pictures, burning in her mind. Every word he said, every touch, felt like a lie she couldn't ignore. How had she not seen it? How had she missed all the signs? Alex tried to act as if nothing had changed. He returned to his usual routine, his smiles forced, his conversations shallow. But Elysia saw through it. The guilt in his eyes was evident, and the way he seemed to avoid her touch. It was clear he was avoiding something, and it wasn't just her. It was the truth. The distance between them grew, but it wasn't just the physical space. It was emotional too. Elysia could feel the walls closing in, the space between them widening in ways that were almost tangible. She would catch him staring out of the window, lost in thought, and wonder what he was hiding. She couldn't bring herself to ask him, not yet. The rage that had consumed her in the study was now replaced by a cold, calculating silence. She wasn't sure if she could face him again without breaking. But then, there were the moments when Alex would reach out, trying to pull her back into the illusion they had created. He would tell her it was all in the past, that those were mistakes he'd made long ago, and that she didn't need to worry. But those words felt hollow to her now. How many times had he said those very things, only for her to find out that they were nothing but more lies? Elysia found herself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts racing. She couldn't escape the gnawing suspicion that there was more to the story. The HIV, the herpes, they were just the beginning. What else had he hidden from her? What other secrets lay buried beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered? One evening, after another cold and silent dinner, she found herself pacing in their bedroom. Her mind was spinning, and she couldn't ignore the growing need to confront him. The thought terrified her. She didn't know if she was ready to face the full truth. But she had to. She couldn't live in this cage of lies any longer. Her hands trembled as she picked up her phone and scrolled through his messages again. She had already read everything once, twice, maybe even 3 times. Yet there was again, a new message just waiting to be opened. With a deep breath, Elysia opened it. The message was from an unknown number. It was simple, but the words sent a chill down her spine. "Are you ready for the next part of the truth?" She stared at the screen, her heart pounding in her chest. Who was this? And what did they mean by next part? She felt her breath catch in her throat. This wasn't just about his past anymore. It wasn't just about the disease or the lovers. It was something bigger, something she wasn't prepared for. Her fingers hovered over the phone screen, uncertainty clouding her thoughts. She had to know. The need for closure, for understanding, had grown unbearable. Slowly, she typed a response. "What do you know?" Her thumb hesitated above the send button. Was she ready to uncover whatever Alex had been hiding? What if this revelation was worse than anything she had already discovered? But the truth was no longer optional, it was necessary. She had to know. She had to know everything. The phone buzzed in her hand, the screen flashing with a new message. "Meet me tomorrow night. Everything will be revealed." Her pulse quickened. It was a trap, she knew it. But she couldn't resist. She had to see it through. And with that thought, a decision was made. Tomorrow night would be the night when everything changed. The following day was a blur of anticipation and dread. Elysia barely slept the night before, her mind racing with the possibilities of what might be revealed. She spent the day in a haze, hardly noticing the ticking of the clock or the conversations around her. All she could think about was the meeting. What would she learn? What would it mean for her family, for everything she had believed in? As the evening approached, the knot in her stomach grew tighter. She dressed in a rush, her hands trembling as she put on a simple dress, her thoughts consumed by the unknown. She had to go. She couldn't back out now. The message had been clear. This was the moment of truth. But what was the truth? She couldn't help but wonder what other secrets Alex had kept from her. The HIV, the herpes, and the affairs with other men, that was just the surface. What had she missed? What had been hiding beneath the surface all these years? Elysia arrived at the location, an old, dimly lit cafe on the edge of town, a place she had never visited before. The air was thick with tension, the shadows in the corner of the room swallowing up any sense of comfort. She glanced around, her eyes scanning the dark corners, but no one seemed to be waiting for her. Then, from the far side of the room, she saw him, someone she hadn't expected to meet here at all. It was Ben, one of Alex's old college friends. He was sitting at a table, his eyes locking with hers for a moment before he stood up and gestured for her to come over. The last time Elysia had seen Ben, he had been nothing more than a fleeting presence at family gatherings, a man who'd always been a little too quiet for her liking. But now, as she approached him, she felt a sense of foreboding that she couldn't explain. "Elysia," Ben greeted her, his voice low, almost apologetic. "I didn't think it would come to this. I didn't think I'd have to be the one to tell you." Alicia's heart raced. "What is this? What do you know about my husband?" she demanded, the words coming out sharper than she intended. Ben sighed and motioned for her to sit. He waited for her to take a seat before he began speaking, his voice calm but filled with a weight of guilt. "There's a lot you don't know about Alex. More than you can imagine." Alicia's breath caught in her throat. "What are you talking about? I already know about the HIV, the herpes, and the other men. What else could there be?" Ben hesitated before answering. "Alex, he wasn't just hiding his sexual history from you. He was hiding a whole life. A life he built around manipulation, deceit, and something much darker." The words hung in the air like poison, filling the space between them with a heavy silence. Alicia's mind raced. What was he saying? What was worse than everything she already knew? But Ben wasn't done. "There's money involved, Elysia. And not just any money. There are people, dangerous people, who Alex was involved with. They've been watching you. Watching your family. They're the reason he's been so afraid for so long. He wasn't just hiding from you, he was hiding from them." Alicia's head spun. Money? Dangerous people? Her entire world was collapsing around her, and the revelation of Alex's infidelities suddenly seemed insignificant in comparison. She stared at Ben, her mind trying to process the words he had just said. "Why didn't he tell me?" she whispered, more to herself than to him. Ben's eyes softened with pity. "Because he couldn't. It was never just about the affair, the diseases, or the lies. There was too much at stake. And now it's all coming to a head." Alicia's world tilted. The truth she had been desperate for was so much darker than she could have ever imagined. The drive home felt like an eternity. Alicia's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles were white. Ben's words echoed in her mind, each sentence weighing more heavily than the last. Dangerous people. Money. A life of lies and manipulation. She couldn't shake the image of Alex as she had known him, the man she had loved, suddenly transformed into someone capable of hiding such a twisted existence. When she pulled into the driveway, she sat for a moment, her fingers still trembling on the wheel. The house loomed before her, once a symbol of safety, now a cage filled with unanswered questions. Her heart raced, her thoughts swirling. How could she confront him? What if he denied everything? What if he said it was all lies? But the truth was clear now. There was no going back. She couldn't continue living in a house built on lies. Elysia took a deep breath, steeling herself for the confrontation that was long overdue. The door opened with a soft creak, and Elysia stepped inside, her gaze immediately falling on Alex. He was sitting in the living room, his back turned to her, staring out of the window as though lost in thought. He didn't hear her enter, and for a moment she simply watched him. He looked the same, dark hair, strong jawline, that familiar, comforting presence. But to her, he was a stranger now, a man who had deceived her for far too long. She walked into the room, her steps measured but determined. "Alex," she said, her voice cold, trembling with the weight of everything she had learned. He turned quickly, his eyes wide with surprise and a hint of fear. Elysia, he said, standing up. What's going on? What happened? Don't act like you don't know, she snapped, her voice sharp. The anger that had been simmering inside her for days now bubbled to the surface. I know everything, Alex. About the HIV, the herpes, the lovers, and the money. His face paled, and for the first time, Elysia saw true fear in his eyes. Elysia, please, we need to talk. Let me explain. Explain? Elysia cut him off, her voice rising. You've been lying to me for years, Alex. Years. You've hidden who you really are, and I've been living in this house thinking we had a life built on trust. But now I see it, everything. You're not the man I thought you were. You never were. Alex took a step forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Elysia, please just let me explain. It's not what you think. I never wanted this to happen, I never wanted you to find out. But Elysia wasn't listening anymore. The words, the lies, they didn't matter. All that mattered now was the truth. And in that moment, the man she had loved for so long was nothing more than a stranger, a man who had broken her trust beyond repair. I don't want to hear it, Alex, she said, her voice cold and final. You've lied to me for so long and I'm done. I'm done with the lies. Her eyes locked onto his, the fury and hurt in her gaze clear. You've taken everything from me. And now, you're going to face the consequences. Alex recoiled as if struck, the realization of his actions finally hitting him with the full force of her words. But it was too late. Elysia's patience had run out. With a sudden, decisive motion, she pulled out the gun she had been hiding in her purse. Alex's eyes widened in terror as he took a step back. Elysia, no, please, but Elysia was beyond reasoning. The years of deceit, the betrayal, and the fear of what Alex had hidden from her were too much to bear. She raised the gun, her hand shaking, but her resolve firm. I never wanted this, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. But you left me no choice. The sound of the gunshot rang out, shattering the silence of their home. The world around Elysia seemed to collapse the moment the gunshot rang out. The heavy silence that followed was deafening, suffocating. Alex's body lay motionless on the floor, a pool of blood quickly forming around him, a stark contrast to the once warm, comfortable home they had shared. Elysia stood frozen, the weight of what she had just done crashing over her. The gun still gripped tightly in her hand, its presence a brutal reminder of her irrevocable actions. Her mind spun, the chaos of the moment blending into a blur of regret, guilt, and disbelief. She hadn't meant for it to end like this. But she had felt cornered, betrayed, and desperate for closure. Tears streamed down her face as she dropped to her knees beside Alex. Her heart pounded in her chest, but there was no going back now. She had pulled the trigger and everything had changed. Alex, she whispered, her voice breaking as she reached out to touch his cold, lifeless hand. But there was no response. The man she had once loved, the man she had believed in, was gone. And in his place was a void, an emptiness that swallowed everything. Her mind raced with what to do next. The police. The evidence. What would she say? How could she explain this? The reality of the situation began to settle in. She had killed her husband. But even as the full weight of her actions bore down on her, Elysia couldn't shake the deep sense of betrayal she felt. It wasn't just the affair, the diseases, or the lies, it was the entire life she had built with Alex that had been a facade. Her world had crumbled, and she was left alone in the ruins, surrounded by the remnants of a love that had never truly been hers. The cold steel of the handcuffs felt heavier than the gun in her hand. Elysia barely noticed the police as they cuffed her, their voices muffled by the fog of her thoughts. The flashing lights outside the house painted the walls in harsh reds and blues, casting a cold glow over the place she had once called home. Home. It felt like a lifetime ago that she had walked through that front door with Alex by her side, full of hope and promise. Now she stood in the center of it, a prisoner in her own memories. She had never imagined her life would end up like this. But now, as the officers led her to the patrol car, it all seemed inevitable. She had made her choice and now she would face the consequences. As the door slammed shut behind her, Elysia leaned back against the seat, her head resting against the cold window. Her mind replayed the moments leading up to the shooting, the anger, the betrayal, the sheer feeling of helplessness. She had felt trapped, and in that moment the gun had seemed like the only way to escape. But now, as the harsh reality of what she had done settled in, she realized the truth. There had been no escape, only a deeper prison of regret. She thought of their children, of the life they had lost. What would they think of her now? Could they ever understand why she had done it? Would they ever forgive her? These questions gnawed at her, each one more painful than the last. Her love for Alex had never been enough to shield her from the truth, the lies, the deceit, the betrayal. But the cost of that truth was something she would carry for the rest of her life. Elysia couldn't stop the tears that fell as she sat alone in the back of the car. She had spent years building a life around a man who had never truly been hers. And now, with him gone, she was left to face the shattered remains of everything she thought she knew. Could she have done things differently? Could she have found another way to confront the truth without destroying everything? The questions would never leave her. But there was one thing she knew for certain. The truth had come at a cost. And that cost had been more than she could have ever imagined. As the car began to move, Elysia looked out of the window, her gaze falling on the dark sky above. It was a quiet night, the stars barely visible through the haze of her thoughts. And in that silence, the weight of everything she had lost pressed down on her. This was the end. There was no going back.